For the 90th time, we are talking some dynasty decisions. Over here on the Fantasy Stock Exchange, we break down your fantasy football teams, your dynasty fantasy football teams, talk about all of your trades, all of your rookie drafts, all of your questions, and some of the moves that you guys are trying to make in your dynasty leagues to eventually build those monsters and take down some championships. So if you want to submit your team to be on future videos, you guys know the drill by now. To skip the line, our Flock Fantasy subscribers get first priority. You can check that out over there, flockfantasy.com/FSE for 30% off, plus 6 months for free if you sign up annually. And also, you can submit your teams for free using the Google submission form in the link in the description. So before we get into it, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. We are 10 episodes off of the fabled 3 digits. 100 is right around the corner. I still remember when we dropped the first episode of the series, and we didn't exactly know what it would turn into, but obviously through 90 episodes at this point, you guys have shown so much support. We love doing these type of videos. We love breaking down your teams. That it's become an FSC staple. So I'm excited to get into this video. But before we get into the first team, as always, you know what we got to do.
All right, so we're going to start it off with Will's team. Got a couple mother flocker submissions here that skipped the line. Will had an auction draft. So auction drafts always an interesting dynamic in terms of like player values and that kind of stuff. He said the auction draft was June of 2022, so it was actually last year. He said he can only trade picks 1 year out, so he cannot trade his 2025 picks. His team, as you guys can see it on the screen there, 12-team PPR league, superflex, 1 point tight end premium by the looks of it. Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, Taylor Heineke is his main quarterbacks. CMC, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Roschon Johnson, Chase Brown, and others at running back. Wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, D-Hop, and others. And then Mark Andrews is main tight end. Pretty clear that he's trying to compete with this team, given the age of some of his receivers, given the age of his running backs and his quarterbacks as well. Also, doesn't look like he's had his rookie draft yet. He still has his picks listed 205, 301, 311, and 401, and then all of his picks except for his third in future draft classes. So he said he lost Brady, which means he's going to be really shallow at quarterback. No one wants to trade with him without a significant overpay because he's probably the best win now team in the league, presumably. And he said was told Rodgers would cost him his first Diggs plus. Ew, no, don't do that. He said, is Brady droppable at this point? I mean, if you want, if you need the roster space, don't really care. He said, should I try moving one of my older wide receivers since one will always be on my bench for a quarterback? Or should I wait till in season and see how my team and quarterbacks hold up and make any moves when I see weaknesses / injuries? So that is personally what I would do. You're going to be fine for the time being with Kirk Cousins and Geno Smith, but I'll let you give your thoughts on the rest of the team.
Yeah, I agree. If people are just going to be delusional and think, hey, listen, this guy needs a quarterback 3, let me go and fleece him. Let me go get 180% of the value for a mid-tier back end, what is Aaron Rodgers' ADP, like quarterback 20 in Dynasty? This guy wants Diggs plus or a first. Nah, you know what you're going to do is you're going to hold on to Kirk Cousins and Geno Smith. You're going to start both those guys when they are ready to play. And guess what? If there's a bye week, you have enough of a loaded team to be able to supplement that super flex with a high-end wide receiver 2, maybe DeAndre Hopkins. You got options, I think, personally, because if we're looking at it right there, it's a start 12. So 3 of those wide receivers typically on a per game week is going to be A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, and Stephon Diggs for you. The 2 flexes are probably going to be Devontae Adams and Derrick Henry. The 2 running backs are going to be McCaffrey and Eckler. So you basically just got a free DeAndre Hopkins there, where if you need to supplement a week at the super flex, you need to put fucking Gerald Everett in a week in the super flex starting tight end for the Chargers. You have options. If people want to play Petty, you play Petty back is kind of how I'm viewing this.
Yeah, I mean, the starting lineup is your definitely your the part of your team that is the strongest. It's a pretty strong starting lineup in terms of you have to start 3 wide receivers and 2 flexes. So obviously that's going to mean that you need relatively good depth. And I would say you're a little weak in terms of depth, especially when it comes to younger players. But at the same time, you're in a competitive window, you're all in. It's not really that important for you to have young players and ascending players, because once you're out of your competitive window, let's say after this year, McCaffrey, Eckler, Henry, all these guys lose a bunch of value, you're probably going to have to rebuild anyway. So for me, I would say I would just be patient. And if you need to trade for a third quarterback at some point, then I would probably do it when you actually need it. But Kirk Cousins and Geno Smith is good enough to get you by. Like Danny said, if you need to sub in guys in bye weeks like D-Hop or whatever, it's whatever. I'm not going to trade for a third quarterback just for bye weeks. if I don't need to, because Cousins, Geno Smith should be able to get you by. But I mean, if the guy who has Aaron Rodgers is 2-7 in week 9 of the season or whatever, and his price suddenly goes to a way more reasonable, like a 2024 second plus a piece or something, then I would be willing to make a move at that point. But his current price tag is pretty outrageous. So I would say just avoid trading with that guy at that point in time. You could also, I mean, mid-season, if you get to a point where like Kyler Murray isn't back on the field, like I would be willing to trade your 2024 first plus whatever else you have to do to secure Kyler Murray, because not only will that help you and be your third quarterback or whatever, we know that Kyler Murray is undervalued on the market right now. Yep. So some people are just so outrageously undervaluing him. And if you can somehow get him as your third quarterback, that will also aid your eventual rebuild when you probably have to rebuild a year from now, if not, maybe a year and a half from now or something like that. So, I mean, you're in a pretty good spot. We can go through some of his trades here. It looks like he sold his 2023 first back during the startup, during the auction draft, and somehow got AJ Brown for it. And that pick became Michael Mayer. I mean, that's a fleece. We don't even need to talk about that. He also sent away Jeff Wilson, Robbie Anderson, the 212 and the 312. So it looks like he sold all of his 2023 picks during the startup draft, because he sold 112, 212, and 312. And it also, I guess, means that you won your championship last year too. And then you got Sam Howell and Gerald Everett for that. I mean, I'm not like super, high on Gerald Everett, but I do really like Sam Howell, and I think you got good value there.
So I just want to add this. I found this like awesome. He's like, I submitted this team last year and you guys said to just go win. And that's what I did.
Yeah, literally. And then the final trade that he made, he eventually sold Sam Howell in a 2024 third and received like a boatload of draft picks to add to his depth with Roschon Johnson, Chase Brown, Tucker Kraft, and Sean Tucker. I mean, we always talk about taking swings at ambiguous backfields, and rookie running backs usually a good thing there to help. Like, these guys could work into your flex as well. If DeAndre Hopkins is not performing or something like that, and you need to throw in Roschon Johnson for a week, I'm sure he's going to have a good enough role where you're able to do that. So I would say you've done a pretty good job of building up this team. Be patient. There's no rush to sell your first rounder right now for a third quarterback. At the point in time when you actually need one, maybe you sell it, but at the same time, you're probably going to pay a little bit extra. So once a team is going to give you a reasonable chance to actually trade for a third quarterback, then I'm actually willing to go for that. But if the going rate is Aaron Rodgers for a first and Stephon Diggs, like this one guy said, like, no chance I'm making a trade at that point in time. So we could probably move on to Cam's team, which is the next one we have here. He finished third to last in 2022. So he obviously had a pretty high pick by the sounds of it. His team, as you guys can see there on the screen, it looks like a 12-team PPR lineup league, so not a best ball, 6 point per passing touchdown, and a super flex. He has Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, and Sam Darnold as his main guys there. J.K. Dobbins, Antonio Gibson, Damian Harris, bunch of 0 RB, Chase Brown, Tajay Spears types after that. Wide receivers are pretty loaded, though. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Elijah Moore, and others. And then Pat Freiermuth is his main tight end. Already had his rookie draft by the looks of it, because he's got some rookies on his team. Does have a pretty sizable war chest of picks, most of them like mid-round picks in the future, but having a bunch of seconds and having a bunch of thirds and fourths, definitely not the worst thing in the world. So looking at his team, he basically says, what are his team's strengths and weaknesses, thoughts on the trades that he made, what he should be doing right now. And he said he likes investing in young quarterbacks and wide receivers. So he definitely is playing the long game and kind of following the advice that we've kind of set out. And he also said thoughts on depth and target for the 2024 draft. I did a video yesterday or 2 days ago about my top 24 rankings for the 2024 draft. So I would suggest just go watching that. And then he also said, should I go after another stud young quarterback? And then also, should I prioritize trading for a running back? So I'll let you tackle any which one of those questions that he left there.
He ends up, of course, making this Joe Burrow trade. We can dissect this a little bit. Sends away Tua Tagovailoa, Trey Lance, DJ Moore, Tyler Lockett, Javonte Williams, and Dallas Goedert in exchange for Joe Burrow, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CEH, Gainwell, and Raheem Mostert. So for judging this deal, I believe you got the two best assets in the trade. And realistically, if I'm evaluating this, is this package get you Joe Burrow on his own?
I mean, if you're high on Trey Lance and Tua, maybe, then you get some quarterback depth and some wide receiver depth. But I mean, they sent you 5 solid pieces or whatever, 6 solid pieces
for 2 hammers,
2 outstanding pieces.
Yeah,
that's basically how this trade works out. So, I mean, you were in a position by the looks of it where you had like a lot of depth and you wanted to upgrade your long-term
start 9.
Yeah, exactly. And investing in Joe Burrow and Amon-Ra St. Brown obviously is going to to benefit your team more in the long term, especially knowing that you have all these mid-round picks, all these, the extra draft capital. You needed to offload some of these middling assets. As good as DJ Moore and Lockett and Lance and Javonte and Goddard are, they're probably not going to touch Joe Burrow and Amon-Ra St. Brown's liquidity and market value, because, I mean, Burrow himself is worth like 4 first-round picks. And if I knock out 4 first-round picks in this trade, I think Tua is worth probably a mid-first, Trey Lance worth about a late first, DJ Moore about a mid to late first, and then Javonte Williams about a late first. And then it's Amon-Ra St. Brown for Goddard and Lockett, which I'd rather have Amon-Ra St. Brown. So, yeah, I think you won this trade pretty handedly.
Yep, I love what you're able to do here. Next one, 2 fourths in exchange for Mike White. I mean, I guess, but
I guess if you like Mike White, he has 1 million fourths too. So
yeah, I mean, like, yeah, if you like Mike White, go for it. Whatever, not really much to evaluate there. I don't mind that move. And then finally, this next move, Curtis Samuel, Donovan Knight, and a 5th for Damian Harris. And your spot, Damian Harris, is now your running back 3, whereas a guy like Curtis Samuel was probably never going to touch your lineup from the receiver position. So I definitely don't mind making this move because I think it's a pretty cheap one to do. And obviously, we've been talking about Damian Harris all summer, getting a potential role as that goal line back in a very good offense in Buffalo. So overall, I really like that trade for you.
Yeah, I mean, the point where you're at with this team is that you have a lot of, late round draft capital. You have a lot of like movable pieces like Gibson, Damian Harris, CEH, Chase Brown, Tajay Spears. All these guys could have like sizable roles or periods of time where they have good value. This is the type of team where I'm looking to build around my long-term assets like Burrow, like Chase, like Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Pat Freiermuth, those type of guys, and offload and shed some production potentially mid-season to improve my own 2024 first. And then probably if you build this thing the right way by 2024, you should be a house money contender. And at that point in time, you're probably in a good spot, but I would not, be quick to, unless things are just absolutely breaking dynamite for you. J.K. Dobbins, a top 10 running back. Antonio Gibson's an RB2. Damian Harris is like this year's Jamal Williams or whatever. You're probably not going to compete this year, give or take. Just looking at, and assuming the rest of the teams in the league are probably in a better spot than you. So I would say that I'm going to be liquid with this team, be water with this team, and kind of sell off players as they spike in value, and then look to build out, more first round draft capital. And the nice thing too is that you have a bunch of mid round picks. So like maybe you can use some of these assets to tier up into better picks. So like if you took, Chase Brown, who's like suddenly the starting running back for the Bengals, and a second round pick, maybe you could get to a first round pick kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. Not to mention, you do have some opportunity in case. I mean, it really depends on what your league mates' thoughts are on the draft class, but you do have some movable pieces where, like Corey said, obviously if you're contending, if your team completely breaks right, you can compete. But worst case scenario, let's just say you're more so a 2-4 type of start. Maybe your running backs don't materialize. J.K. Dobbins doesn't get the full workload right away. Maybe one of the quarterbacks goes down. Anything that could happen there. You do have some pieces that you could potentially use to acquire more capital, because I do think regardless of what you do with this team, 2024, you're going to be completely in a more win now contending type of window. Realistically, if that first nets you a running back, or that first, if you tank it enough, it can get you Drake May. Like, I think realistically, your pick's probably going to be in the 3 to 6 range. But of course, like, it fully depends on what happens. I would basically classify this as a house money, like Corey said. So you can go a multitude of directions based off how your team kind of starts off the year.
Yeah, this is the type of team I'm just looking to do as many trades as possible and try and upgrade my assets, incrementally over the course of all the trades that you're doing. A second you spot that a player is overvalued, you sell them. And the second you spot that a player is undervalued, maybe you go buy them using your ton of second and third and fourth round picks. So if the Mike White trade, while we don't really, mind, like, care really because it's Mike White, if in principle you think there's a bunch of players out there undervalued for second, third, and fourth round rookie picks, by all means, buy and invest in those players and, potentially sell them for more later or use them once your team is actually ready to compete. So definitely a lot of flexibility, a lot of different directions you could go with this thing. But I think overall you're in a pretty good spot. So let's move on to the next team, which is from Powerman, aka Brandon. He said he's trying to tank for one of Caleb Williams or Drake May. And he said also feels like he needs to just build out the running back depth in the upcoming draft classes. He said, what moves are you making to try and get this team ready to be house money / a competitive team in 2024? So it's a 12 team, half PPR, 6 point per passing touchdown, half tight end premium with a super flex. Very, very FSE standard. What's up?
It is an FSC standard league because it's the no flocking league. And that's also supposed to be full PPR. So this is actually in the no flocking startup we did this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, Lawrence is his main quarterback. It's a super
Yep.
flex league. Obviously, we're in the league, so we know it's a super flex. He has Charbonnet, A-Chain, Kendre Miller as his, like, low-end investment running backs, but those guys, have some upside. They're rookie running backs. They're also, all three of them are guys that are probably not going to be the greatest this year, but might be better in the future. And then T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, Christian Watson, Jahan Dotson, Zay Flowers, Gabe Davis, Cedric Tillman, all those guys have some good upside. And of course, you have some legitimate studs there at the wide receiver position. And then David Njoku, Tucker Kraft. I remember getting sniped on Kraft in the startup, which was not fun, or in the rookie draft, which was not fun. And then he has all of his picks except for his third, basically. So, I mean, I'm also deploying this exact strategy in this league. So it's funny that I'm giving you advice on this because I literally also have like a productive struggle shell. I have Josh Allen and Bryce Young, and then I have a bunch of young wide receivers. And I also have, is this the league I traded for CJ Stroud in as well? So I also
Yeah.
have him in this league. So, I mean, my advice would be kind of to just continue to build out your quarterback position, your wide receiver position. He says he's trying to tank for Caleb Williams and Drake May. I personally think your team's better than mine. So I don't think you're going to get Caleb Williams. And I think there's actually a team that's worse than mine also in the league. So it might be a little bit of an uphill battle to get one of the top quarterbacks next year, is all I'll say.
Yeah, I will say you do need some things like Corey said to break right for your like negatively, if you will. It's so funny how I'm saying like counterintuitively, you need it to break right, but it has to go like negative for it to be actually successful for you. But regardless, if things quote unquote break right for you, like you probably need to ship one of Higgins or Devontae Smith if you really, really want to compete with. I think it's you and BD Bacon that are the ones that are fully committing on tanking. So that's what I would say. There are a good amount of contenders in that league. I know I'm contending, Tano's contending, I believe Brock's contending. Like there's probably about 4 or 5 contenders. That league might be the most evenly like split for half the league is contending, half the league is rebuilding. For me personally, like I kind of said, if you want to truly compete in that regard, if you can get, well, how would you equate Higgins in this? Because I do think he
I would
might
just
be
go
able
after Drake London. That would be the easy one. He's probably not going to be as good this year. He's younger and he'll have more long term value from that perspective. He's definitely got a way better team than I do because I just looked at my team. And aside from Bryce Young, Josh Allen, and CJ Stroud, and two of those quarterbacks are rookies, so we're not expecting huge fantasy production from them. My whole receiver core is rookies. Like I have Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, like all these guys, they're all rookies. Outside of DJ Moore and Tony Pollard, like everybody on my team is like not productive. So I'm probably going to out tank him. And like you said, I think BD Bacon sold like a lot of startup picks during the startup draft. So I think he's in even worse spot than I'm in right now. It might be a little bit challenging for you to get a quarterback if you don't secure one of the top guys. If for some reason all my rookie wide receivers hit or something like that, and you do out tank me, then I'll be very sad. But I don't really need a quarterback anyway, to be honest. So I wouldn't even hate that if I just got Marvin Harrison at the top. So you're in a bit of a challenging spot depth wise to be able to figure this thing out because first and 2 seconds is okay draft capital, but it's not like crazy. It's not like you have 3 1s next year to be able to fill out the rest of your team.
Yeah, no, I would agree there. I will say, because we obviously know this league, I already know trade offers are going to be sending and going out of the wazoo. So I'm sure because you're a capable manager with the amount of activity in this league, you'll be able to make those proper adjustments. So for me personally, like Corey said, try to get Higgins off the team, and you pretty much need to get a quarterback from the next draft, like Corey said.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next team that we're going to cover here is from Bryan. He has his team listed here, 12-team PPR best ball league. So keep that in mind. Superflex, 1-point tight end premium as well. Josh Allen, Bryce Young, and Jordan Love, pretty similar to the quarterback core I just talked about. Ramondre Stevenson, Travis Etienne, Damian Pierce, Madison, James Cook, a couple of guys there. And then Diggs, Olave, Elijah Moore, mainly at wide receiver, and then Gallup and Lazard and some other guys there. And then at tight end, he's got a pretty deep core there. Greg Dulcich, Chika Conquo, Cole Kmet, Taysom Hill, Hunter Henry. I think in a best ball league, that would be really, really solid tight end depth there, but does not have his first round pick in 2024 to go along with this. So I would say, I mean, dead giveaway is not having your first round pick. This is kind of a competitive team by default because you don't have your first rounder. But I also, do think, given that it's a best ball format, your tight end and running back core are kind of going to complement each other really well. Because aside from like your studs that you have at those positions, you're going to have a lot of, weeks and spike weeks out of the rest of the core. So I think this team is built out really well, minus the fact that you're kind of weak at wide receiver.
Yeah, that. And if you're a contending team and you don't have your first round pick, I am very curious to see what one Bryce Young can net you. Can Bryce Young net you a veteran quarterback plus to help you compete, or can you add a slight plus onto Bryce Young to get up to a Deshaun Watson type? That's what I would be doing with his team, because as much as I love Bryce Young, the long-term projection, it's hard to see him being a legitimate top 12 overall quarterback in fantasy this upcoming year. I think at ceiling wise, maybe he throws, 23 touchdowns. He's the quarterback 15, but realistically, given the Carolina offense this year, I don't really think that we can expect much more than a fringe top 15 level finish. So for me personally, because you need that production, Bryce Young, again, see if you can get Deshaun Watson, see maybe if you can get Dak Prescott, see if you can get somebody like that who can give you a more significant advantage. Because like you said, everywhere else, apart from maybe wide receiver depth, I think you have enough tools to be able to compete.
Yeah, maybe Bryce Young straight up for Dak Prescott and Mike Williams is something that you can do. And then that gives you another wide receiver for your team that can give you some spike weeks. And also, you get a quarterback that's more in his prime and can help you win right away. But yeah, I mean, the rest of your team is in pretty good shape. Even, your depth, Madison, James Cook, like CPAT, those guys are going to give you spike weeks in a best ball format. And same goes with the tight ends that you have on your bench there as well. So, I mean, a pretty well-constructed team, especially when you consider the format. I would say if you guys are in Dynasty best ball leagues, I am so much more likely to fade tight end, just knowing that I can take so many dart throws. And yeah, like Travis Kelce's like such a huge advantage at the tight end position in a best ball format, like on Underdog. But given that this is a league where you can make moves, you can make trades, and you can, pick up players or whatever, I think it makes more sense to just throw darts at, Chigakonkwo's and Cole Kmets and Taysom Hills and Hunter Henrys and guys like that.
Well, in a best ball format, like you kind of said, obviously an underdog, you're restricted to 20 rounds. Whereas in a startup, you're just accumulating value. And I notice a lot of times once you get past like round 14, round 13 area,
tight ends are always good values.
Like you can literally stockpile like 6 of those guys within rounds 14 to rounds 22, to be honest. Like you're getting a lot of value there. So your Jake Ferguson types later in the draft, you're fucking, obviously that's the first name I think of because he's a Cowboy, but even like Cade Otton or something like that, you know what I mean? Obviously I talk about our own 2 teams tight ends, but like there's always going to be guys that you can just pick up at that range that can spike in a touchdown and get you a usable week.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, he said he built his team roster construction in mind with that. That's why he took all the shots at running back and tight end and wide receiver. He said, do we think he can contend? I think you can if you made probably the move that we talked about, which is maybe offloading Bryce Young. Maybe it's not Bryce Young. Maybe you offload Jordan Love and somebody's really high on Jordan Love and you can get a Kirk Cousins plus a Mike Williams for Jordan Love as well. That would also help out your competitive window as well too. And then you also have a trade that you made here. He made a trade during the startup draft by the sounds of it. So this is a new league, which is also important to whether or not he can contend. He sent away his 2024 first. So this is how he got rid of it. In exchange, he sent away his 2024 first, DeAndre Swift and Rachaad White in exchange for Travis Etienne, Elijah Moore, and Chigakonkwo. So, I mean, when we're equating value here, 2024 first, given that it's going to be mid to late, I would rather have Travis Etienne, or at least it's a wash. Yeah. Then Elijah Moore, I would rather have than Rachaad White, but it's probably pretty close. And then it's Chig for Swift. But like I would say overall, this is a relatively fair trade. I think, I like both sides depending on what either side was trying to accomplish. So this trade makes sense. I don't know. I think it's like a B level trade.
Yeah. Maybe the way I kind of equated it is the 24 first and Swift versus the ETN and Chig, and then the Elijah Moore versus Rachaad White. So I prefer Elijah Moore to Rachaad White, but I also slightly prefer, like you said, the 24 first and Swift, the ETN and Chig. Overall, again, B-level type of trade, kind of gets you what you need to do. I do think if you held the 24 first, you probably could have gotten a little bit better buying power in season to potentially get some spike weeks, especially once we know what's going to be going on there. So that's the only kind of like pick I have at this. But overall, again, this helps you accomplish a goal, so I don't mind it.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, you're in a pretty good spot. Like we said, make some moves to help aid your competitive window, maybe get a little bit older at quarterback, which we almost never say, but in this situation, it kind of makes some sense. Before we get into the 5th team, which is from Brody, we need to hear a word from our sponsors over at Aura, and you guys will be hearing that message right now. All right, fellas, I am proud to introduce our new sponsor, Aura. Aura is an easy-to-use app that includes everything families need to protect their identities, to protect their money, to protect their passwords, their devices, and more. Anybody can find anything on the internet nowadays, including your full legal name, your personal email, your home address, your phone number, and even some information about your relatives. I know if I Google my name, along with all the fantasy football stuff comes stuff with my parents, where people work, even stuff relating to my late grandfather. It feels like an invasion of privacy, if I'm being honest, and this information is accessible to the public because of data brokers who profit from selling your information to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, anybody else that wants to learn more about you. I'm sure you guys have gotten spam text before. Same kind of idea. What Aura does is they identify these data brokers, they opt out of these junk mail and telemarketing lists on your behalf, and you can use my link aura.com/fantasy stock exchange for 2 weeks to see how many data brokers are sharing your information. Aura's app also features a VPN, a password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, including 24-hour US-based call centers if you have any issues, internet parental controls, and it protects your devices from malware. Aura is basically every internet safety tool that you'll ever need, all inside one app. It's really easy to set up and everything that you're ever going to need to stay safe on the internet. You don't need to download 7 apps to get a VPN, to get parental controls, antivirus protection. It is all located for one price. So go to aura.com/fantasy stock exchange to start your free 2-week trial. Also linked down below in the description, or you can scan the QR code. And we're back to the video. All right, big shout out to Aura. Again, the best cybersecurity tool that you'll ever need. The link down below for that is in the pinned comment. Now let's break down Brody's team. Yeah, he said this is his first and only Dynasty League that he drafted back in 2019. So he's got like a real, long-standing Dynasty League here. I'll break down the team and then some of his questions. It's a 14-team, 1 quarterback, half PPR, start 8. So 14-teamer, and it's a start 8. So you probably want to have like a pretty good starting roster. Depth, important in a 14-teamer, but definitely when you only have to start 8 players, you probably want to have the best starting lineup possible. His team's in, I would say, pretty rough shape, though. Kyler Murray is his main quarterback. Running backs, like not much to speak of there, aging guys. And then wide receivers, Traylon Burks, Quentin Johnson, Marvin Mims mainly. And then at tight end, he's kind of weak there as well. So, this is a pretty difficult position to be in. He has all of his picks, but to be honest, with a team like this, I would probably want to expect that you have a bunch of extra firsts on top of your war chest of picks right now. And then he said this year he's decided to do a lot of research before the rookie draft for the first time ever. And he said over the past month, he learned a ton from us about how stupid he's been the past couple years. That's not necessarily our goal, but if you're doing things wrong, and we're glad we could help out with that. He said he traded away some valuable 2022 and 2023 picks a couple years ago, and now it has hurt his team, obviously, given the state of his team right now. He said that the league feels relatively sharp from some conversations I've had around trades, and given the fact that this league's been around since 2019, I would say your league mates probably know how to play Dynasty at this point in time. He said there's 3 true contenders, 3 rebuilders. The rest probably house money / in the middle of the pack. He said the good news that he has all of his 2024 and 2025 picks. Marvin Harrison, the 1 quarterback league, is obviously who he's shooting for to get that cornerstone wide receiver, that cornerstone asset. And he said shopping his vets has been a tough this time of year because of, Dalvin Cook's free agent situation and some, Kareem Hunt's not signed right now as well. He also says, how would we kind of further break this team down to continue to rebuild? He said right now his frame of mind is just that 2023 and 2024 are pooched. Like he can't do shit. Yeah. And 2025 is probably his first real competitive window potential.
Yeah, basically with this team, you need to do all in your power to make sure that 2024 first is Marvin Harrison Jr. or the asset that is Marvin Harrison Jr. and that 2025 first is the asset that is Nicholas Singleton. You need to do all in your power. The only players that I would want to keep on this team, and I'm going to put it bluntly, are Kyler Murray, Traylon Burks, and Quentin Johnson. Every single other person on this team is fair game. And heck, if somebody wants to overpay for those other guys that I just said, go ahead. If they want to overpay, if they're offering no market or slightly below market value, I'm not tempted to sell them because I personally like those guys. But everyone else, Matthew Stafford, Dalvin Cook, Jerick McKinnon, all those old guys, even Marvin Mims. If somebody wants to give you attach a second and you get a future first in 2024, that should be an option for you. Realistically, every single move on your team from here on out should be completely ridding this roster of the junk. And the only real pieces, to put it bluntly, that aren't junk, in my opinion, are Kyler Murray, Traylon Burks, and Quentin Johnson. So for me personally, you got to get that 2024 first overall pick. And even if you get Marvin Harrison Jr., like, are you contemplating potentially even gathering more assets in 2025, given the state of the roster?
I'd probably keep Harrison because I think most people are not going to overpay for a rookie wide receiver. But at the same time, if people are willing to overpay for him, then by all means, you can definitely make some moves from there. He also he made some trades recently to try and help aid his rebuild. He sold Mike Evans for the pick that became Marvin Mims. It was the 114. I think he just personally drafted Marvin Mims too high. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have taken him, which would essentially the 202 in a 12 teamer, or 114 in a 14 teamer. I think he just took him too high. But again, it is a one quarterback draft, so maybe that's why Marvin Mims goes a little bit higher than us traditionally in superflex leagues. So I think, at face value, that was a decent trade for Mike Evans. You offload some production there. And then he also sold Joe Mixon and Josh Downs for Quentin Johnson, which I think was a fine trade in and of itself too. So, I mean, you have a lot of work to do. Like this, you need to find a way to sell off your veterans. And he said it's tough sledding right now. You just got to kind of be patient and stay the course. Once Dalvin Cook signs somewhere, maybe it makes him easy to sell off. I'm looking like anyone I'm selling, like aim for 2025, because it's going to be really difficult to get 2024 picks out of veteran players. But if it's 2025 picks, then maybe people are more
Maybe
easily,
2026.
they're easy to give away those picks because they don't really know who the prospects are yet.
Yeah, maybe even like it'll be tough. Like if somehow you can package Dalvin plus and you can get any type of first round equity, you're probably gonna have to settle on early projected second, even if you package like Dalvin Cook plus fucking, Hunt, McKinnon, Gus, whatever, Matt Stafford, whatever the hell a contender wants. Like at that point, you're going to have to kind of settle. And in this type of situation, especially in the one quarterback, especially in the 14 team format, it's going to feel gross making some of these trades. But just remember that the quote unquote value you would lose on some of these deals, because I'll be honest, other teams are going to see your team and they're going to try to lowball you, even if at some points you have to sell for 85 cents, 90 cents on the dollar. The point production you are ridding for yourself is the goal. Because realistically, the opportunity cost of you, buffing your chest and keeping somebody because you viewed it as a low ball offer, and that pick falling from Marvin Harrison Jr. to the 103 is way more detrimental to your team than just accepting, like I said, 85 to 90 cents on the dollar for some of these assets. And it's not like they're like crazy assets that you really care about, quote unquote, slightly underselling. You know what I mean? Like it's Dalvin Cook. Big deal if somebody sends you 1 second for Dalvin Cook. Like you don't need Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, exactly. Like I wouldn't be married to like, I value Devontae Parker as two third rounders. Like if somebody gives you 1/3, like sell them. Like you don't want that production on your team. As stupid as Devontae Parker is, he might like fall ass backwards and 8 touchdowns this year. They just paid him like he's like the best receiver in the league pretty much. So maybe just sell everybody and anybody on this team, not named Burks, Kyler, and Quentin Johnson. And even Burks, honestly, I'm not as high as you on him, so I wouldn't mind selling him either. But yeah, I think you got a lot of work to do. You got an uphill battle for sure. Good luck with that. Andrew is the first free submission of the video. So again, if you guys want to submit teams and you're not site subscribers, you can submit them in the Google form down below, and we'll get to as many as we can. If you've previously submitted a team and we never got to it back in like February or March or something like that, just indicate to us that you submitted your team before and we never got to it in the form there. He said he entered his team on June 22nd. So perfect example of what we're talking about. He said he had 3 trades go through after that. So he's resubmitting his team post-trade analysis. So 12 team, half PPR, 6 point per passing touchdown, single quarterback league. Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, Mac Jones, Joe Mixon, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, AJ Dillon, Tank Bigsby, Chase Brown, and others. Cooper Kupp, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman as his main wide receivers, and then Darren Waller and a couple other guys there at tight end. He has an extra first rounder in 2024 and then an extra second rounder in 2025, but does not have any of his mid-round picks in 2024. Some of the trades that he made, we can kind of go over some of these quickly. He sends away, actually, we'll start from the first one. He sends away Antonio Gibson, Kendre Miller in a 2024 second. So all 3 of those assets are worth second round picks, in my opinion.
Yep.
He gets AJ Dillon, a 2024 first, and a 2025 third.
I'm all for it. Yeah, this is the type of move I like to see, getting that 2024 first. I'm assuming it's going to be the late first, potentially the mid first, because I mean, judging from your team, you're probably the one who projects to be a late first. So yeah, I love this move. I love the projection of Antonio Gibson going to the year as a potential breakout. I love the projection potentially of Kendre Miller working in on that Saints offense. And the second obviously is a good pick, but you are getting the most valuable asset in the deal, which is the 2024 first. And you're also getting arguably the second most valuable asset in the deal, because I think it's a discussion whether you prefer Gibson, Kendre, the second to AJ Dillon, but I think AJ Dillon probably leads that group. So if that's the case, yeah, give me your side all day.
Yeah, I mean, at the very worst, he cancels out Antonio Gibson, and it's Kendre in a second for a first and a third, which I think is a pretty decent move. Then he sends away Elijah Moore and 2 2024 firsts and a third. And he looks like he shoves his chips to the middle here. He goes out and buys Cooper Kupp, Joe Mixon, Chase Brown, and Aaron Rodgers. So Lot to unpack. Cooper Kupp, I mean, obviously going to move the needle quite a bit from a fantasy production standpoint. I would say in a league, he's probably worth at least Elijah Moore, a first and a third, give or take.
Yeah.
And then it's basically Chase Brown, Joe Mixon, and Aaron Rodgers for the other first. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this trade? Do you think he kind of preemptively shoved, or are we talking about a situation where his team was close enough that you probably would have done the same thing?
Yeah. I again, like, obviously getting the equity point production that these guys can give you is obviously valuable. I just don't really like the timing of it, because I feel like there's a lot more negative that can go on for Cooper Kupp for the rest of the offseason versus I think Elijah Moore can get a lot more positive going for him this offseason. Hypothetically, if we're hearing in training camp that Elijah Moore has a big connection with Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Watson's looking fantastic, I think you missed out on a little bit of market capability there, because I do think come the season, Elijah Moore would be a big riser. Whereas with Cooper Kupp, you're inheriting all the risk that Matthew Stafford's elbow's not fully cleared, and Cooper Kupp is still not fully recovered from that injury he suffered last year. Like, there's a lot more volatility on your side. And not to mention, I think worst case scenario, guess what? You probably could have just paid this price come September anyway. So paying that in June right now just gives you all the risks to inherit for the next 2.5 months.
Yeah, I also don't love any of the other three assets. I mean, I like
Agreed.
Chase Brown at his cost, but like Mixon and Rodgers, like in a one quarterback league, Rodgers isn't really moving the needle. And I mean, you made this trade before you sold Kirk Cousins too, which is we'll talk about in the next deal. But I would have just rather held Kirk Cousins and not traded for Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers as your second quarterback. For me, if you wanted to trade for Cooper Kupp, I would have just traded for him. I would have traded Elijah Moore, one of your firsts and a third for Cooper Kupp instead of trading for the rest of these assets, which I don't think would have been equivalent to the first rounder, the additional first rounder that you gave up in this deal. So I don't really like this trade personally. I think you kind of jumped the gun a little bit.
Yep.
And yeah, Cooper Kupp is going to move the needle a bit, and you kind of lock down the Bengals backfield. But like you said, a lot can go wrong with Kupp. A lot can go wrong with Mixon as well if he gets suspended or something. And yeah, you have Chase Brown, but it's not really the same. And then Aaron Rodgers, I mean, how much is he really going to move the needle in a one quarterback league? Herbert's going to be in your lineup week in and week out, most likely. And I would have rather had Cousins, who you traded away in the next deal. You trade away Cousins, Ty Chandler, and Dwayne McBride. So like the Vikings handcuffs and Kirk Cousins for Mac Jones and Jacoby Myers. I mean, you're in a competitive window. Again, like I said, I would have just rather kept Kirk Cousins and not traded for Aaron Rodgers. At face value of this trade, I suppose it's a pretty decent deal. I would rather have Jacoby Myers than the handcuffs, and I would rather have Mac Jones than Cousins. Actually, no, I would rather have Cousins. So, I mean, it's a wash. I don't think it really matters too much.
I think I would rather Cousins to Myers and Mac, to be honest, in your position, because the way I'm looking at it, it's a start 8. When is Jacoby Myers ever entering your lineup? If Jacoby Myers enters your lineup as a contending team in a start 8, you're not a contending team. And again, you are a contending team because he's like your wide receiver 8 here. But like we kind of said, you could start 4 wide receivers per week. Unless you face like complete bye week apocalypse, like you should be fine in that regard. Or hypothetically, you could have gotten your replacement depth wide receiver at some point in season with maybe a second of buying power.
Yeah, the sketchy thing about this team too is that as a contender, I want to have a couple positional advantages. And outside of Cooper Kupp, like, I mean, you got Metcalf, DJ Moore, and Higgins, who are solid wide receivers. I would say that's your strongest position, and including Pittman as well. But like, are any of your running backs going to have a top 10 ceiling? Probably not. I don't think so, at least. Maybe Mixon 5 years ago and Connor 5 years ago, but not anymore. And then Darren Waller's like can't stay healthy. He's over 30 years old as well. You might have no tight end by midseason. And then Herbert, yeah, he's going to be a solid quarterback. I just think this team is lacking some star power for one that I'm looking to like shove to the middle and try and win the championship with.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe an opportunity arises come in season where you can package, Mixon or Connor or Swift plus the 2 first, and maybe you can get a lock hammer running back and maybe a good tight end. So hypothetically, maybe an opportunity arises come season where DeAndre Swift, the mid first and the late first, can get you Jonathan Taylor and I don't know, George Kittle. And if that type of opportunity arises,
those type of moves would definitely make sense. I just think the way your team is structured and the way your team is positioned right now is worrisome, especially knowing that you like made these like shove these players to the middle type of trades in June, when I just personally think it wasn't necessary. I think I probably would have held and you had at one point you would have had four first round picks.
Yeah, you would have had 4 firsts of buying power. And I think that's an underrated part too. What people don't realize too is spending your first too early when you have a bunch. You can get to the point where once you monopolize the draft, people realize the only way to get first round equity is through you. So you can potentially get some better deals at times. Like I've gone through leagues where I have, 6 or 7 first round picks, and I can get, players for 80 cents on the dollar just because people have that itchy rookie fever and they want to get in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. So, mixed bag, I would say, give or take on this team, but we can move on to the next team here, which is from Dawson. He said, came to the realization that despite his solid roster, he lacked the quarterback power to truly compete. And he said, especially since one team is overpowered in the league. So there is a monster in this one. So he started to liquidate a bit, primarily his running backs. And then I'll break down the team here, and then we'll get to his other questions. It is a 12-team, full PPR Superflex league. Dak, Jimmy G, and the 49ers quarterbacks there. Roshan, Gibbs, Dobbins, Rashad White at running back. Then he also has Lamb, Higgins, Olave, Ridley, Gallup, etc. at wide receiver. And then Freiermuth and Laporta at tight end, with 4 first-rounders next year, including 2 of which that are expected to be early and a second expected to be early, and then all of his picks in the future. So, I mean, I'm looking at this team, and I'm thinking this is like a prototype house money team. You got 4 ones next year. You got a young nucleus at wide receiver, and even the guys that aren't young are value accumulation guys like Calvin Ridley. So, I mean, for me, this is a pretty well-constructed team. He also asks, he sent Tony Pollard for one of his 2024 firsts. There's a chance that 3 of those 2024 firsts end up being top 4 or 5. And he said, where should I go from here? What do you think of the moves he's made? So what are your thoughts on the team? And then we'll break down the trades.
Yeah, like I said, house money. Basically, I'll just answer this question right now. You said, where should I continue with this team? You wait and see. You kind of see what type of opportunity arises. I do think there's potential upside where if you see some early signs, like Gibbs is a stud right away, Dobbins returns to form, maybe you buy a quarterback for cheap. Then, not to mention you do have the San Francisco quarterback, so maybe they're giving you production, and you could buy, a Jared Goff type or whatever for like an early projected second that you have. That could be an opportunity, but realistically, like Corey said, I'm just completely waiting. I'm just completely, selling off any fringe assets, and I am making 2024 my monster year. Because guess what? There might be an overpowered team in your league, but you add a Caleb Williams type to this team. You add, with the 3 other firsts, 1 running back, and maybe you consolidate one of those wide receivers to go out and get a stud. Like hypothetically, do you think there's an opportunity arises where you can sell Higgins a first and maybe a small plus for like Jamar Chase or something like that?
Yeah, you could definitely make a move like that. You could also consolidate at quarterback too if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Take one of your, like, if you have one of those firsts that's expected to be later, you could take Dak in a first and go after Herbert or something, or Lamar or something like that. And maybe you could make a move like that, or Lawrence or Fields, whatever quarterback you want to go after, just because Dak's a little bit older and maybe you want to get a little bit younger at that position. But some of the trades he made, and we're going to see kind of how he got some of the embarrassment of riches that he has. He sent away Tyler Higbee in a second for Pat Freiermuth. I think that was a pretty solid move. Freiermuth relatively worth about a second-round pick. Higbee not really worth a whole lot, so I like that move. He trades away Chris Godwin, Jaden Reed, and a 2024 fourth for Calvin Ridley and an early second. I think Ridley and Godwin are almost exactly identical in terms of value in my rankings right now. So the fact that you basically got an early second for Jaden Reed, I think is a pretty solid trade. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that when you think Godwin and Ridley are all that different? I think they're like literally back-to-back in my rankings right now.
I personally would prefer Ridley. For me, I just the way I kind of view it is although you're getting a couple years of age, I believe. Godwin's a year
and a half younger, I think, give or take.
Year and a half younger, but then you you compare that to the fact that I do have Calvin Ridley a decent chunk higher in redraft. I believe Calvin Ridley is my 24th or 25th overall player right now. Chris Godwin more so a 5th round pick. So I think they pretty much canceled themselves out, though. I probably would rather slightly prefer Ridley because I think come season time, if he's showing that dominant self, I think he's more translatable to a contending team that if you were to ship him off. So hypothetically, if I were to compare it out right now, given the projection of the year, I think a contender would be much more likely to buy Ridley for a first than they would Godwin for the first. So for me personally, like I said, although we value them pretty similarly, give me Ridley. And then when you're comparing it, I love Jaden Reed, but if you can tell me you get a 24 early second, I'm taking that every time.
Yeah, absolutely. I would take an early second over him for sure. Then we send away Travis Etienne and Mike Gesicki for an early first and Roschon Johnson. I don't know what this guy's doing. This is, Roschon Johnson has some real potential, let alone the fact that you got a pick that could eventually become Marvin Harrison, Caleb Williams, Drake May. So, you took that guy to the woodshed. This is obviously a huge piece, a huge trade for you. And then, I mean, he also listed too, that he didn't list this trade, but he said he sent away Tony Pollard for one of the early 2024 firsts as well. So, I mean, you basically got 2 early firsts for Tony Pollard and Travis Etienne, which to me is, I mean, it shows a lot that your league mates are overvaluing running backs and overvaluing production. And it's probably good that you decided to take this route of, I'm going to be a house money team, and knowing that that's the value of draft picks in your league, you're better off just spending those picks than you are trying to trade them for veterans later on. So, I mean, you're in a great spot. All you really have to do this year is wait and see. Maybe your team starts to compete a little bit and you can make some moves, but most likely you're probably just going to let things stay the course and be a very, very good team come 2024. Ridley is really the only guy that I would potentially consider like absolutely moving off of midseason, because he might be like legit a top 6 fantasy wide receiver, and you could sell him easily for like a first round pick to a contender.
But I think we can move on to the next team. It seems like you're in a pretty damn good spot, given the liquidity you built up and the young talent that you could have appreciating throughout the year. We can move on to the final team, and that is from Matt.
Yeah, so just a quick thing about Matt. Matt actually did not use our code. He used Flock's code. So for those of you guys that want to skip the line, you do have to use our code. But we are still going to cover Matt's team because he does support us over on the site. But just in case you were wondering, one of the major benefits of using our code instead of the other creators in the Flock Fantasy Families code is that you do get to skip the line here. But we are still covering Matt's team. He had he has his team listed here: 12-team PPR, 6-point per passing touchdown, Superflex League. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson as main quarterbacks, Ken Walker, Miles Sanders, James Cook, etc. at running back, Jamar Chase, Chris Godwin, Jahan Dotson, and others at wide receiver there. And then at tight end, he does have Kyle Pitts. And then he has a couple extra ones in each of the next 2 draft classes as well. So, I mean, overall, looking at this team, a lot of very good, like stable assets, the quarterbacks, Pitts, Chase, those type of guys. You got a bunch of guys that are going to have a lot of value. And then Godwin and Dotson and Walker are also pretty solid assets as well. So, I mean, looking at this team, he said his assessment basically is his team feels solid with starters, but pretty much no depth. And that's exactly kind of what stood out to me right away as well. He said, should I be rebuilding or making a run this year? And he said, would you make the trade to give away Lamar? So he has a trade that came into him from June 29th that we'll talk about in a second. But what are your thoughts on the team? Do you think he's in a spot where you'd be potentially buying production because he has some extra first, or would you be kind of waiting and seeing how the team materializes?
Definitely waiting and seeing. I think what you were able to do with the onesies was absolutely brilliant. Being able to get Lamar, Burrow, Kyle Pitts to lock down your onesies. Like, I'm not worried about any single one of those guys for the next 5+ years. So love what you're able to do there. You mentioned you might be able to sell Lamar. Realistically, I don't like selling elite quarterbacks unless I get a complete Godfather type of offer. So we'll see what the deal is, but I'm already kind of leaning on no. Then we look at the wide receivers. You have Jamar Chase heading the group. You got some decent production behind him with Chris Godwin and Jahan Dotson. But in a 4 wide receiver start potential league, I probably would want at least 1 or 2 more options to fully feel satisfied. And then at running back, you have some guys that can break right, but realistically, no true top 8 overall, top 6 overall projected hammers that you can rely upon in a contending window. So like Corey said, I think this is a pretty liquid type of team. I think this is probably a house money type of situation where if you see maybe Walker's giving you immediate returns, Miles Sanders, a low end RB2, maybe you buy one hammer at that point, like a Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, someone like that. At that point, you can kind of adjust. But yeah, I'm just kind of waiting and seeing entering the season based on what I see.
Yeah, and I think he did a good job of his trades, recognizing that he didn't really have the depth to compete right away because he was on the board at 107. Presumably, that would have been Jordan Addison. He had a 2024 second as well that he shopped away, and he trades down from 107 to 108. So somebody clearly had a preference between one of those wide receivers. He picks up the 108. He gets Jahan Dotson and James Cook. So pretty good return on just a 1-spot move down and a 2024 second. I think give or take that second and the move down is very easy. Equivalent value to equal out 108 and Jahan Dotson, then you basically got a free James Cook out of it. So definitely a solid move there. And then he moves down again from 108, and he gives up Aaron Jones and Michael Pittman, who are more guys that I think could lose value this year. Guy like with Pittman having a rookie quarterback, as much as he's like still a young receiver, I still think he might lose some value with Richardson, potentially going through some growing pains. You net that into a 2024 first, a 2025 first, and Kenneth Walker, who on May 5th, 2023 would have been at an all-time low because they had just drafted Zach Charbonnet. And you get a Jacoby Myers out of it. So, I mean, between those 2 deals, collecting the assets, collecting the first, getting some youth at wide receiver and Jahan Dotson, getting some youth at running back and Kenneth Walker, I think he did a really good job. Because before these 2 trades, his team would have been like just Lamar, Burrow, Pitts, and Chase pretty much, and Godwin. Like he would have had those stable assets, but no real depth to speak of whatsoever.
Well, I am curious because I mean, looking at this overall, I think it's pretty remarkable what you were able to do. You basically turned the asset of the 107, the 24-second Aaron Jones and Michael Pittman into what would that be? Jahan Dawson, James Cook, 2 firsts, Ken Walker, and Jacoby Myers. Am I reading
Yeah.
that right?
Yep.
Yeah, I know that phenomenal moves there. Being able to collect as much value as possible. So, yeah, no, great work. In terms of this trade, you mentioned you had the Lamar Jackson deal got offered to you on June 29th, so roughly about a week ago. So you've of course been pondering it since then. Lamar Jackson, KJ Osborne for 2 firsts, a second, Desmond Ridder and Zach Charbonnet. I am like insta declining that unless he's willing to move that 24 for second into a first. Maybe I consider countering then, but at this value, no. Like I'm keeping Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, this is one of those trades that like maybe you could talk yourself into it being fair, but at the same time you're giving up an elite quarterback, so you
Yeah,
don't want the trade to be fair. When you're selling an elite quarterback, you want it to be in
overpay.
your favor. Like the value should equal you. Like Danny said, if it was 3 firsts, Ritter and Charbonnet, I'd be like, okay, Lamar's probably worth about 3 firsts. Charbonnet is probably worth about an early second. Desmond Ritter, if you're high on him, maybe is worth an early second as well. At that point, maybe it's a worthwhile deal to make, but yeah, 2 1s, a second, and Ritter and Charbonnet is not enough for me to move off of Lamar Jackson. So I also would decline that trade, especially knowing that, if things break right for you, you should be able to compete this time next year. And of course, Lamar Jackson is going to be a big part of that. And you want to hold on to him for that reason. Maybe if you could tear down from Lamar, if somebody's like not high on Kyler Murray or something, and you could tear down from Lamar
Get a
and
first.
get Kyler Murray in a first and a second, probably in some leagues, I think that would be a worthwhile trade. But I would still want an elite quarterback in return. And Desmond Ritter is definitely not an elite quarterback.
I 100% agree. If you're going to tear down from Lamar Jackson, I'm not doing it for anybody that's going outside of the first 2 rounds of startup. The only one I would like maybe consider possibly, and that has to be where I'm in a tear down situation and I need a quarterback back. Maybe CJ Stroud plus, but realistically, I would need Bryce Young. I need Anthony Richardson. I need Dak Prescott. I would need somebody there and above. And I think Kyler Murray again was a great show. Maybe somebody is lower on Deshaun Watson, and they're offering you like Corey said, Deshaun a first and a second, Kyler a first and a second, something like that. You can consider it because maybe you're scared that there's some monster teams and you can't really compete year one, so you get extra value and then still get the type of upside next year. But honestly, outside of that specific scenario, just hold your former MVP quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe, offloading him for Kyler definitely would rid you of some points, but it's probably not going to, drastically impact your overall finish. So, I mean, like I said, you're in a pretty good spot. You definitely need to figure out some ways to hit on some depth, hit on some later round picks. Maybe next year in next year's class, you do the same thing and you trade down from one of your like later firsts and, pick up some more assets, pick up some more picks or whatever. And then by 2025, you're like really, really ready to go and ready to blow the doors off this league or whatever. But I think you've done a good job of building up some assets and accumulating some depth at this point in time. You just kind of need to keep chugging along. So if you guys made it to this point in the video, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave any of your comments down below, any Dynasty questions. We will definitely get to them. And then also be sure to check out our site, flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off for 6 months for free if you sign up annually, and for a free Zoom consultation if you sign up annually as well. We will basically do a Dynasty Decisions episode with you on a Zoom call. Whichever one you want to, if you want to do it with me, you can do it with me. If you want to do it with Danny, you can do it with Danny. It doesn't really matter. Whichever one you want to do it with. That is a free gift to you by signing up annually on our site, flockfantasy.com. You'll get all of our bonus content, all of our rankings, redraft, best ball, Dynasty, whatever, 2024. I have them all up there right now as well. Definitely check out all that stuff if you're interested. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.